So, now is an important time in history. The Supreme Court has declared that all states must allow marriage between same-sex couples. There's a lot of debate about these issues on both sides. Let's make something clear. This video is not meant to advocate or support one side of the argument or another. This video is about information. It is clear to me that there are many people who are talking about these issues in these discussions who do not understand the Supreme Court's actual ruling, the American government and political system, and the majority/dissenting views. This video is meant to inform people so that we can all engage in better conversation. First of all, let's just explain what the ruling is. Many people are saying that gay marriage is legal now, and that's one way of putting it, but that's not exactly what's going on here. To basically sum up what's happened, a majority in the Supreme Court of the United States has found it unconstitutional for states to deny marriage to same-sex couples. This has been a hot topic in America for a long time now. The Supreme Court has not created a law about same-sex marriage. This is an interpretation of the Constitution, which is a different thing than simply making a law. This decision does not mean that everyone in the United States has to participate in a homosexual relationship or marriage. This decision does not mean that any institution that provides or officiates marriages has to do so. It just means that states cannot deny it to anyone. The U.S. Supreme Court has released an official statement about their decisions, and you can read all about the majority and dissenting arguments from many different justices in the Supreme Court online. I want to take a moment to sum up both sides of the argument because I think it is important to do that. The majority has basically said that according to the 14th Amendment, the government does not have the right to deny marriage to same-sex couples. That's the ruling in a nutshell. The dissenting argument. And there are many people who believe that the dissenting argument just simply says, we don't like gay people, we don't think that they should get married. But according to everything that the dissenting argument has said in the Supreme Court release, those are not the specific reasons they oppose this ruling. In a nutshell, some of the justices believe that the interpretation of the 14th Amendment by the majority is sort of a loose interpretation because it talks about due process and how through due process governments can't deny marriage to same-sex couples. Many of the justices believe that this isn't exactly an accurate interpretation of what due process is. The dissenting are saying that due process doesn't have anything to do with same-sex marriage, but has everything to do with arrests and trial in a fair court and things like that, and it doesn't really have anything to do with your right to marriage. The dissenting side is also a bit concerned about what this decision means for the American public who believes in traditional marriage, and they fear that this decision may seem like it is trying to force all of America to believe one system. So the main question and debate that's happening is some people are saying the government doesn't get to give people liberties, it only gets to make sure that people aren't being denied something. But the other side is saying, but they have been denied something. Here are some quotes from the dissenting side. In the American legal tradition, liberty has long been understood as an individual freedom from government action, not as a right to a particular government entitlement. Petitioners cannot claim, under the most plausible definition of liberty, that they have been imprisoned or physically restrained by the states for participating in same-sex relationships. To the contrary, they have been able to cohabitate and raise their children in peace. Nor under the broader definition can they claim that the states have restricted their ability to go about their daily lives as they would be able to absent government restrictions. The majority's better informed understanding of how constitutional imperatives define liberty runs headlong into the reality that our Constitution is a collection of thou shalt nots, not thou shalt provides. This understanding of marriage, which focuses almost entirely on the happiness of persons who choose to marry, is shared by many people today, but it is not the traditional one. For millennia, marriage was inextricably linked to the one thing that only an opposite-sex couple can do: procreate. Here are some statements that have been issued by the majority side. The history of marriage is one of both continuity and change. Changes such as the decline of arranged marriages and the abandonment of the law of coverture have worked deep transformations in the structure of marriage, affecting aspects of marriage once viewed as essential. These new insights have strengthened, not weakened the institution. Changed understandings of marriage are characteristic of a nation where new dimensions of freedom become apparent to new generations. No union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals of love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family. In forming a marital union, two people become something greater than once they were. Many good and decent people oppose same-sex marriage as a tenet of faith, and their freedom to exercise religion is, unlike the right imagined by the majority, actually spelled out in the Constitution in Amendment 1. The fundamental liberties protected by the 14th Amendment's Due Process Clause extend to certain personal choices central to individual dignity and autonomy, including intimate choices defining personal identity and beliefs. The right to personal choice regarding marriage is inherent in the concept of individual autonomy. The right to marry safeguards children and families, and thus draws meaning from related rights of child-rearing, procreation, and education. The marriage laws at issue thus harm and humiliate the children of same-sex couples. This does not mean that the right to marry is less meaningful for those who do not or cannot have children. Precedent protects the right of a married couple not to procreate, so the right to marry cannot be conditioned on the capacity or commitment to procreate. Many people are wondering why they, as an American citizen, didn't get to vote on this issue. Well, that's a bigger topic, and we need to understand something about how the system of the American government works. One thing we need to understand is the difference between a republic and a democracy. A democracy is basically the idea of everyone voting on everything, everyone has a say, everyone has a vote, and a republic is kind of like that, but in a more representative form. Now, what the United States of America is not a democracy, but a democratic republic, and that's an important distinction to understand. We, as all the citizens of America, don't get to vote on every single decision that the government makes ever. We get to vote for representatives like senators, presidents. Now, when we vote for these people, we're voting for someone to represent our voice. This is why there are candidates who say, I believe this, and candidates who say, I believe that. And it's your job to decide which candidate represents your beliefs best. Then you vote for that candidate, and they go into the government and kind of have your voice for you. The Senate and the House of Representatives are basically in charge of making laws. They vote on them, they debate about them, and the president gets to have a check and balance where he gets to check in and decide if they sound okay or not. The president is sort of in charge of the military and international affairs. Now, the Supreme Court, it's kind of their job to make sure that everything the president and the Senate and the House of Representatives are doing are in check with the Constitution. Now, the way the justices in the Supreme Court are chosen, we the people have voted for the president. And when there's a vacancy in the Supreme Court, the president gets to nominate someone to be a judge, who is then approved by the Senate, who was voted in office by we the people. And that is kind of how the American people are involved in choosing Supreme Court justices. Now, once you're a Supreme Court justice, you're a justice for life. There are several ways to get off. You can die, or you can get impeached by the legislature if you do something really bad. So the way issues get brought to the Supreme Court is when it's... How do issues get brought to the Supreme Court? Let's look it up. So basically, a case is brought to a low-level court. And once a decision is made there, someone can appeal to have that decision brought to a higher court, and a higher court, and a higher court. Once you've appealed to as many high courts as you can then try to appeal it to the Supreme Court. When you want to bring an issue to the Supreme Court, you prepare what's called a petition of certiorari. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Then basically all these different petitions are brought in front of the Supreme Court justices, and they get to decide what cases they want to look at. So if you're wondering why you didn't get to vote on this issue, although many states have voted on this issue, one of the reasons it's been brought to the Supreme Court. That's because that's not necessarily how the system of government works, at least in the way it's been brought about through the court system this particular time. Now, just because this is the way the government works doesn't necessarily mean that you have to feel okay with it. You can be okay with it, Or you might not, and maybe this is an issue you want to try to bring to the Supreme Court one day. So if you have a big concern about this ruling, it might be that you actually have a big concern about the way the American government works, and many people do, and that's okay. Many people are also pretty comfortable with the way the American government works, and that's okay too. You don't have to be uncomfortable with it. You get to say or think whatever you want because of the First Amendment, which protects your right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, anything like that. I highly recommend that you go online and you read the ruling. You don't have to read the whole thing, because luckily there's a pretty good summary at the beginning of it. You can also go online and read the Constitution. You can go to the Supreme Court's website and they have lots of information. You can go to different blogs, different news sources, but understand also it's important to get both sides of the argument. And many people are plugging for one side and only saying that side, and many people are plugging for one side and only saying that side. I think it's really important to be informed about both sides before you make your own decision. Now, you can do or say whatever you want, but just remember that your argument is going to be a lot stronger if it's backed up with facts. We have to understand that a lot of people fall in the middle and might not be sure about what they think, and that's okay. We can't say all people that believe this are this way, and all people that believe this are this way. There might be people out there who value the idea of traditional marriage, but who agree with the ruling because they think it goes along with the Constitution. There might be people out there who think same-sex couples should be able to get married, but don't agree with the ruling because they think it's unconstitutional. There's a lot of variety that can happen, and people don't have to fall onto one side or another. Everyone is an individual with an infinite possibility of understanding and knowledge. They don't fit into one category or another. And it's up to you to decide what your understanding is. And when you talk about things with other people, try not to categorize them. Anyway, I hope we're all a little more informed now and that we can continue to engage in conversation.